Well, guys, we're kicking off a new series today called Heart Revolution. Heart Revolution. A revolution means there is change that happens. And in order for there to be a revolution, there has to be a revolt, right? And so in thinking through this and just praying through this series that God, has us in for the next couple weeks, really what I feel like God is saying is, I want there to be a revolt against the old. I want you to go after the new. That sometimes we're hanging on to old carnal mindsets. We're hanging on to destructive behaviors. We're just hanging on to old offenses, things that happened long ago. And it's like this past, it's like this chain, it's like we're just dragging this thing around. And what God is saying is, if you want to live differently, you've got to think differently. Something has to happen in your heart. This is the epicenter of your life and your action. It's your heart. And listen to what it says in Proverbs 4:23. It says this: above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So if you want to see lasting change in your life, you're going to have to deal with this. And so I like to just say once again, we need a heart revolution to happen. Is there anybody here today that's willing and ready for a heart revolution? Somebody that's willing to revolt against the old and embrace the new that God wants to bring into our lives? Well, this is what we're going to be talking about over the next couple weeks. So I want to just have a little bit of fun with you, okay? I want to give you an opportunity right now to be completely honest without the fear of being judged, okay? Because a lot of times people are afraid to be judged in church. Is that the truth? Yes. So I want you to be honest. Don't be lying in church, okay? Because then we're going to judge you for lying. Just messing with you. But I have a quick question for you. How many of you in this place believe that you are smarter than the average person? Come on, raise your hand. Yeah, come on, be truthful. Most of you in this room, if we were honest, you would say, I think I'm smarter than the average person. And it may not just be test scores. You're like, man, I know some really dumb people. It's like, and I guess, some of us are like, man, I'm smarter than the average, because the average I'm hanging around with is pretty low. But the thing is most people do believe that they're smarter than the average person. How many of you in this place believe that you're a better driver than the average person? Yes. But I know you're lying, because I've seen some of you driving around here, man. There's nobody that can drive around Beaumont. It's like, I'm just kidding. And most people, not only do they believe that they're smarter, not only do people believe that they're better, there's a lot of people that believe that they sin a lot less than other people too. Come on, let's be real. But when it comes to life and life's issues and decisions, most people in this room, if you were really being honest, you think that for the most part, you're on the right side of the issue. And we look at other people, and the way that we look at them is we think, man, they're all jacked up. Come on, how many of you ever thought that about other people? So we're like, hey, we're on the right side of this issue. The people I know, they're all jacked up, tore up from the floor up, and they need to get right or they're going to get left, okay? Like most of us, that's kind of our mindset. We can actually look at ourselves as those who are a little bit more superior, those who are a little bit more gifted, maybe a little bit more smart. And I got to talk to you about this today. I got to talk to you about this new addiction that's sweeping America, and it's just taking it by storm. There's this new addiction that's just running rampant, and it's been for a few years now that I see. And it doesn't matter if you're black or white. It doesn't matter your creed. It doesn't matter your color. It doesn't matter if you're a believer or a non-believer. There is an addiction that is sweeping America, and we need to talk about it. And it's this. It's the addiction to being right. It's the addiction to being right. There are so many people that are addicted to this thing called being right, that we walk into situations and we believe that we're right on everything. We're right about our political views. We're right about our religious views. We're right about our ideas about parenting. We're right about our ideas about marriage. And we see that when people are addicted to being right, they're looking for comfort zones. They're looking for places that automatically make them feel safe, that a place that actually affirms their beliefs. I see this happen all the time. You see people, they come in, even into church, and they're not looking to be challenged. They're not looking to grow in their faith. What they're doing is they're looking for a pastor that agrees with what they already agree with, and they go, you know what, I just love that guy. I love that church. Why? Because they play the music that we think is right. The pastor preaches the sermons that we already agree with and we think are right. So we're not looking to be challenged. We're not looking for a heart revolution. We're not looking for a change here. What we're looking for is to be affirmed and to have what we already believe confirmed. Is that making sense to anybody in this place? You choose the news that you like to listen to. Why? Because they already agree with what you agree with. So therefore, people often will say, hey, Pastor, you should check out this video, man. And they send me a video, and they're like, yeah, I really like what this guy has to say. But what they're really saying, translation, is this. Hey, listen to this guy because he believes what I believe. And because I believe I'm right, I believe that makes him right too. Are you guys seeing this? And so there's this addiction that people are trapped in called the addiction to being right. And I'm going to tell you, it's not easy being right because I'm right all the time. It's a lot of pressure. It's pressure to be right, right? I'm using the word right a lot. I experience this every day. If you have any questions about theology, women in ministry, gifts of the Spirit, come on, just come talk to me. And if you don't agree with me, I'll tell you why you're wrong. I can show you what you should believe about capitalism, abortion, gun rights, gender, critical race theory, and which is better, Coke or Pepsi. Come on, just come talk to me. I'll set you straight, because I'm right. And of course, you guys know, you're sensing the sarcasm here. But the reality is that we live in a culture that is full of people who believe they're right. And that's what has led to the division that we experience now in our nation, is that we have a whole lot of people that have come in, and like I said, they're looking for a space to be right. They don't want to be corrected. They don't want to be instructed. They don't want to learn anything new. They don't want to be challenged. It's just, I feel that this is the right thing. I feel that this is the right way to go. I feel that this is the right way to live. I feel that this is the right way to raise my kids. And we are above being teachable now because we are addicted to this one thing called being right. And so you got to hear me out today because I'm going to challenge you as I always do. But listen, we can slip into this dangerous trap when we become addicted to being right. And this is what it is. If I can get my next slide up today, is that the addiction to being right manifests as overvaluing our own opinions. It manifests. The way that it plays out in our lives, you're going, well, I'm not really addicted to being right. I don't know if I agree with you because I'm right. But often we don't realize that the addiction it manifests, the way it plays out is that we overvalue our opinions. In this verse, as I was studying this week, I found myself in the Bible, or at least with my old self in the Bible. Have you ever found yourself in the Bible? It's kind of interesting. And it's beyond the name Stephen, because, Stephen got stoned, so I don't want to be that guy. And some of you are, now we're not talking about that kind of stoned. We're talking about you get hit with rocks, people. But I found myself in the Bible. I found somebody that I identify with. I found my life verse of the old guy, the guy that needed a heart revolution. And I want you to see this in Proverbs 18:2. It says, fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. Are you guys seeing this? That fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. Does this not describe our generation right now? Does this not describe our nation right now? Is that we have a bunch of foolish people that they don't want to learn anything. Don't correct them. Don't teach them. Don't challenge them. Don't get them to think differently, to live differently, act differently. No, we're not into that. Because I'm addicted to being right. And what I want you to understand is that I've got opinions. I'm armed with opinions, and you're going to hear me roar. And that's how so many people live their lives. But listen, the Bible is very clear. This is foolishness. This is foolishness. To even think that we're right about everything is just utter foolishness. But yet, this is the way of our culture. I see people often, that who want to air their opinions. It's so annoying. If you go on the news, especially if you go on ESPN, come on, man. You got an ex-pro basketball player that's got more opinions about the NFL, and you're like, dude, just stop, man. Come on. Am I on a little soapbox there? It's foolishness. Somebody who has never done anything in that realm, has never had that as a part of their life, but yet they are an expert on it. Well, in the same way, we do the same thing when it comes to overvaluing our opinions. We have people like, well, I've never been a parent before, but man, when I have kids, shoot, man, they're going to be great. They ain't going to be like those bad kids you're raising. Raising baby's kids. You know what? I'm not single anymore, but if I was in these times, I would be pure. I'd be pure, white as snow. And I could teach you how I would be able to battle loneliness. Opinions about everything, but you don't even know what you're talking about. You're not living that journey. And so it voids us of compassion and wisdom. There's others, it's like you may not say this, but some of us think this. Come on. If I was the president or if I was a world leader, gas prices, food costs would be lower than ever. World hunger would be solved. America would be energy independent, and we would be in the streets singing Kumbaya together in unity. Because after all, I'm armed with opinions and I am right. That's the heart, that's the mindset of most people in our culture today. But you've got to understand that in Jesus' time, it was no different. He was surrounded with people with plenty of opinions and people who thought that they were right. As a matter of fact, the most trouble Jesus had, he had trouble with these guys like to call the Wright Brothers. And I'm not talking about the Wright Brothers that flew the airplane for the first time. No, I'm talking about the Wright Brothers. You know them, the ones who were holier than thou, the ones who were right, the ones who kept all of the commandments, kept all the laws. Yeah, the Pharisees, they were called the Wright Brothers. And Jesus had trouble with the Wright brothers. Why? Because they always thought that they were right. And so today I want to take you to this text in our Heart Revolution series. The message actually today is titled, The Need to Be Right. The Need to Be Right. And we're going to pick this up in Luke chapter 18. And we're going to kind of power through some verses here on really a heart change, a heart revolution that has to happen, a revolt against the old, a revolt against culture. We're going to live counterculturally as Christians. We're not going to be people that are arrogant. We're not going to be people that are prideful. We're not going to be people that overvalue our opinions, but we are going to have a heart revolution where we begin to seek the presence of God, seek his will and his ways. Listen to this story that Jesus begins to tell. It says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. How would you like to be described like that by God? I mean, this is Jesus. He just just goes in, man. And he says this, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down, meaning they were confident that they were right. They were confident that they were in right standing with God. They were confident about their opinions. And it says, and they looked down on everyone else. And Jesus told this parable. It says, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Let me help you see this real quick. So the Pharisees were people who would pray these extravagant prayers in public. They had this little box on their head with scriptures in there, and they were trying to say, like, Jesus, you're on my mind all the time. Of course, they didn't know Jesus, but it was God. God, you're on my mind 24/7, kind of almost like a love song. And they were committed, and they would do all the right things. And so what you have to understand is that visibly, they were right. Visibly, they were righteous. I mean, if you think about it, God gave us 10 commandments, and then Jesus was like, man, y'all are simpletons, so I'm going to take it down to 2 commandments, right? But these guys, they were so much better than you and I. They actually kept 613 commandments. So on the outside, they looked right. But then we have the tax collector. Tax collectors, if we looked at him on the outside, he looks like a money grubbing, just shimmy sham slimy dude. Is that a good description? Shimmy slam, whatever. We're not going to repeat that one again. But on the outside, he looked very wrong, very unrighteous, because the tax collectors of those days were in cahoots. They were working for the Romans. They were traitors to their own people. And often they would go and they would collect taxes from the Jews, but they would collect a little bit extra from everybody and they would pocket that money. So of course people didn't trust them. People hated them. So on the outside, the Pharisee, the Wright brothers, they're right. And on the outside, the tax collector, everybody would agree they're doing something that is completely wrong. And listen to the heart of the Pharisees as we continue in this story. It says, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. Man, This guy is pretty arrogant, is he not? He's like, just like to your face. Like he's just basically saying in 2022 vernacular, you are trash, okay? That's how he's saying it. And listen, he says, I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. So what he's saying is, I'm doing the right thing. I'm righteous in my own eyes. And compared to everyone else, I mean, I have the right to look down on them. Because after all, the Pharisees were addicted to being right, just like many of us in this room today are. Let's continue in the story and let's see Jesus' response. Well, actually, the response of the tax collector first. It says, but the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven. He beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Wow, what a stark difference. And we continue in this story, and this is Jesus' response. He says, I tell you that this man, speaking of the tax collector, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. What an interesting thought. What an interesting thought. That the Pharisee saw himself as right and the tax collector as wrong. He slammed the gavel down. And how many times do we do the same thing? We slam the gavel down on people. We see the outward expression. We see what they're doing. We see what they look like. We see what they're smoking. We see what they're drinking. We see what they're watching and what they're listening to. And we ourselves take it upon ourselves to say, I'm living right. They're living wrong. But there's something that you've got to understand here is that to Jesus, it wasn't only, okay, it was about right and wrong, but it wasn't only about being right or wrong. It was about pride and humility. It was about pride and humility. And why would God preserve this scripture for you and I for thousands of years? Because there's something that you need to know when it comes to pride, is that the proud people don't love well. Let me just say it. Some of you need to write that down today. That proud people don't love well. And that's why God is challenging you and I today and saying there has to be a heart revolution that takes place. There's got to be a revolt against hate. There's got to be a revolt against pride. There's got to be a revolt against holding things against other people. There's got to be a revolt against looking down on other people that don't sin like you do. Why? Because proud people don't love well. And we have been called to love well. There's a different call. There's a different beat that we're marching to. And so God has preserved this for you and I to see this today. So what I want to do is I want to give you two things when it comes to marks of a heart revolution. This is how you know that you've embraced change and that something is going to happen differently in your life moving from this day forward. Is there anybody that wants to have a heart revolution today? Come on. Can you guys let me know that you're alive out there? Man, I see hands all over this place. That's great. Come on, we're moving together. So the first thing is this, that if you're going to have a heart revolution, is that you have to prize humility, and it has to be greater than pride. So your humility has to be greater than pride in your life. See, guys, we live in tense times, and you know this. We're kind of working through the aftermath of a pandemic that shut people down for a few years. You look at the racial tensions that happen. You look at the social unrest. There's a lot that has happened in the last couple of years. You look at a really difficult political, cycle that happened. A lot of disappointment on both sides. A lot is going on. And because of that, because of the wars, and because of, our history kind of being torn apart and the moral fabric of our nation, because of all of that, what it's done is it's forced people to go to corners. There's been a lot of division. There is no middle ground. There's no more being in the gray, kind of like, hey, I have ideas. I kind of like some of the Republican ideas. I kind of like some of the... No, you got to be right and you got to be wrong. And it's like, oh, well, I'm kind of, here's sinner, I'm here, I guess. Okay, I guess I'm over here. And a lot of us feel that pressure, do we not? Because people are addicted to being right, and those who are addicted to being right are unbendable, and they want to make you think and live exactly as they do. And listen, that's a mark of pride, not a mark of humility. We look at all these different things that are going on around us, and here's the thing that Christians, and this is where I warn you because most of you in this room are believers in Jesus Christ, is that Christians often, this is where we get in the trap, where pride really just hooks you. And you're in. And I believe that many people have good intentions, but the problem is that many followers of Christ think that part of their job is to be right. When in all actuality, God's called us to humility, not to be right. And so many of us out there, it's like, and why is it difficult? Because we have the truth, we know the truth, so therefore we think that we need to use the truth as a weapon against people. And this is a real challenge for many people because it's like, I go in the situation, it's like, well, I'm listening to them and they're saying something that's completely false. And we're like, I just got to bring truth, man. I'm going to drop the hammer of truth on them real hard right now. And we don't ask ourselves, okay, how do I present this in a way that is humble? We just drop the truth. And we go, man, that didn't work out. I just lost a friend. I just lost my brother. I used to be able to go to Thanksgiving. Everybody was excited when they saw me pull up, and now I see them, close the shades. Like, what's going on? It's because you're full of truth, but you don't have love. You're full of truth, you lack wisdom. Why? Because your judgment has been clouded with your pride. And what God is calling us to today is to say, hey, you've got to do this different. That your humility has to be greater than pride in your life. Come on. I want to lay something out, and I want to help you guys see a little bit of a flow, okay? I think that sometimes when we teach and we give you a flow, it's actually going to help you understand and process through it. It's going to actually help you make some change. So here's what happens, is that when you believe that you're right about everything, okay, and most people in this room, if I was to talk with you, you would admit that you do believe that you're right about most things. What happens is that when you believe that you're right, you're addicted to being right, you're going to find yourself getting offended with people who you deem to be wrong. Okay, let me just say it again. That if you think you're right about everything, you're going to get offended very easily with people that you think are wrong. So when they come to you and you go, well, I don't like the way you vote. I don't like the way that you behave. I don't like the way you dress. I don't like the way you talk. What happens is when they go, well, I don't give a rip about what you think. Well, I know the truth and I'm right. So all of a sudden now offense has taken root in your life. This little seed of offense is like, I don't like them. I don't like how they talk to me. I don't like how he came against me at the dinner table. I don't like how he embarrassed me in front of the whole family and came against me and told me that God stuff was for losers and people who are absent-minded. You know what? How dare he say that? Because I am right and I know the truth. So now offense starts to take root in your life. And over time it simmers. It simmers, and you start thinking about it. You're meditating. You're driving down the road like, I can't stand my brother. I can't stand my mom. Like, why does she always act that way? Man, my sister, she's a mess. She's a hot mess, and she thinks she's all that. And you're simmering over these offenses, and what happens is that you go from being right to being offended, and then what happens is something gets into your heart, and it's this word called contempt, that you go from right to offense to contempt. And what does contempt mean? Instead of hating what someone does, you start hating them for who they are. I'm going to talk about some political stuff, but it's not meant to be political. Look at what happened with Donald Trump. He comes in, people are like, I don't like his ways, I don't like his idea, I don't like the way he treats women, I don't like this, I don't like that. I'm not saying he was right or wrong. But look what happened over a 4-year period. People went from not liking his ideas and his behavior to actually hating the guy. Then you have Biden comes into office and it's like, well, they hated our guy and he was wrong and the guy can't even put two sentences together and everybody has all these reasons. So now they have offense towards those who were against their guy and now they're offended over here because after all, we were all right. And now you look at them and they're like, well, I don't only hate what he stands for, but I have a hatred for Biden too. Can you guys see how this has divided our country? Because we have a whole bunch of people that it all started with this. The seed was they were addicted to being right. Addicted to being right, got offended, the offense simmered. Now you've got contempt in your heart. You don't only hate what they think, you don't only hate what they believe. You actually have a hatred inside your heart for them. And then where does this lead us? It leads us to becoming what I like to call an assessor. An assessor. See, the Bible calls the enemy, the devil, he's the accuser of the brethren. I think that many Christians, because we like to tone it down, we like to put some sugar and spice on our sin. So instead of it being judgment and condemnation, we like to just call it, I just assess people's choices. I just like to assess their ideas, and I kind of they're wrong or they're right. Like, I'm just an assessor. Like, I don't really judge people. I'm just kind of assessing them. I'm not condemning you. I'm just assessing you. Because after all, I'm right. So think about it. Here's the flow. If I get my next slide, is that you started out with an addiction to being right. Now you're offended because people don't agree with you. And the people that don't agree with you, now you've got contempt in your heart for them. You have a hatred inside of your heart. Every time you think of them, it's like your heart rate goes up. When you start thinking of them, man, you start getting like tension in your jaw. And now you become an assessor. Assessor of the brethren, man. It's like, you know right, so I'm going to look at everybody else and I'm going to see if you're right or if you're wrong. And when you get to this point, you know what you've done? You know what I've done if I get to this point? Is I signed up for my membership card to be part of the Wright Brothers. Full-fledged member, man. You can even get a key fob if you want, with the Wright Brothers, community. We become judgmental and we become critical of other people. And I think about this whole assessing people. You look around and you just listen to the way people talk. They'll look at this new, young, mom in the church and they're like, yeah, she's really sweet. I think she's really great. But man, she just lets her kids run wild. You guys, have you ever heard that? Yeah, of course. Some of you have said it. And now you're convicted, so it's all quiet in here. Man, I'm telling you. Got to warn you to wear the steel-toe boots sometimes. But we become assessors of other people's lives. That guy's really cool. I kind of like him, but man, the more I've got to know him, he just seems to be all about himself. But because you're right and you don't know anything about his life, you don't know what he's gone through or what he's going through, but yet you feel qualified because you're right, he offended you. Something inside of you is like, I don't know if I like him anymore. And now you feel free to verbalize how you feel about him publicly. Who did that? The Pharisee. God, thank you that I'm not like this guy. Thank you that I'm not like robbers. Thank you that I'm not like evildoers. Thank you that I'm not like scum like this tax collector. They were assessors, and we're tempted to be assessors as well. And so understand, this is the process. And so how do you eliminate all this? You got to deal with this. This is the root of it, is the addiction to being right, overvaluing our own opinions. You got to deal with this. And what that does, it dismantles the rest of it. There's got to be a heart revolution, Hub City Church. There's got to be a revolt against this, the old ways of thinking that we're right. And what we do is we begin to operate in humility. Why? Because those that have a heart revolution, they declare one thing, is that my humility is going to be greater than my pride in my life. Is anybody getting anything out of this today? Here's the second thing when it comes to people that have a marked difference in their life, that a heart revolution is happening, is that they've got a fresh approach. They've got a fresh approach. I'm going to unpack this for you. But understand this, that your approach has a lot to do with being effective. We can be right, but with the wrong approach, it can discount your rightness. Okay? Last service I said, man, is rightness even a word? Somebody said, yeah. And I was like, I don't know. But anyways, we're going to roll with it. But understand that your approach to people and the way that you handle them, it can discount your rightness. So you could be doing the right thing. You could even think the right thing. You can know the right thing. But you can foul it up with your approach. And what kind of approach am I talking about? It's this. When it comes to truth, presenting truth. The truth presented with pride, what it does is it hardens people. But the truth presented with humility, what does it do? It melts people. Let me explain this. Have you ever had somebody come to you really harshly, really critically? Oh man, I can't stand the way you guys did this and you did that. Is there a part of you that wants to bend and oh, I'm so sorry? No, you want to rise up, right? It hardens you. You're like, wait a minute, how dare you talk to me like that? And especially publicly, and how dare you talk about my wife like that? Or how dare you judge my motives? You don't even know me. It hardens you. And when people come at you with pride and it feels like they're looking down at you to squash you and crush you versus reaching down to pick you up, because that's what humility does. It reaches down, not to push you down, but to pick you up. Something different happens. And we see this So in our lives, we've got to have a different approach because many of us, this is our approach. This is how we deal with our children. This is how we deal with our wives. This is how we deal with our coworkers. Pride is oozing off of us. And we think we're doing the right thing because we are right. It's like, well, look what the handbook at work says. This is the right thing to do. Look what the Bible says. This is the way that you should be living. This is the right thing to do. Right instruction, wrong approach. Because many of us, we are guilty of this. We present the truth with pride. And what does it do? It hardens your wife towards you. Hardens your husband's heart towards you. Hardens your children and your neighbors and your coworkers. It hardens everybody's heart. They can't receive from you. You're armed with the truth. Yeah, you're right. But the way that you're presenting it is hardening them. It's not melting them. And so you have to ask yourself a couple questions when it comes to this, especially putting this into action. Do I want to always be right, or do I want to be effective? Do I want to be right, or do I want to be effective? Because listen to me, church, there are many people out there making a point, but they're not making a difference. There are a lot of people out there making their points by blasting their opinions about everybody and anything out there. They're making their point, but they're not making a difference. When I look at Jesus, there was nobody that walked this earth throughout any point in history that was perfect, but he was. There was nobody that walked this earth at any point in history that was as right as he was. But yet, Jesus didn't harden people with the truth. He melted them with the truth. Let me explain this just as an analogy for you. See, when something melts, it changes form. It changes form. When you melt it, it could have been in a block, a square, and now it's melted down into whatever it is that you're trying to shape it into, whatever molds you put it into. Well, understand this, that God wants us to be shaped into his image, into the very image of Christ. That when people look at our lives, like, wow, like, Shay, you look like Jesus, girl. Pastor Joe, you look like Jesus. You look like Jesus, brother. You look like Jesus, brother. You look like Jesus, sister. You guys see what I'm saying? That's the whole goal. So there's this melting that happens through humility. But what we do is we slam people over the head and we harden them. We're trying to bend them and, like, you're going to think like me. You're going to act like me. You're going to be just like me. But when people are melted into his image, I'm telling you, the glory of God is shown. But often we get so trapped up in the wrong delivery, the wrong approach. And Jesus was so effective. He was so effective. And how do we know this? Because sinners flocked to him. They were not repelled by him. I'm talking about sinners of all kinds. And people, listen, in those days, this is what's really interesting, is if anything bad happened in your life, you gave birth to a child that had a birth defect, you were blind, you were deaf, they would attribute that to somebody in your life having sinned. And so understand that when somebody, even when the blind man comes to Jesus, he's looked at it as like that guy was wrong. He's either wrong or somebody in his lineage did something wrong. And so he has all these people that are considered wrong coming to him. They're not being hardened by him. You know who was hardened by him? Was the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the ones that were hardened because of their own pride. But you see these other people that they're approaching Jesus as they're coming to him in humility, but then he's receiving them with humility and compassion. So how is this interchange? What's this play that's going on? Jesus heals the blind man. A blind man comes to him. A demon-possessed man comes to Jesus. A leper comes to Jesus. A prostitute. There's a girl who's shacking up with her boyfriend, freely comes to Jesus. There's tax collectors. There's a Roman centurion. You're talking about a guy who is in the army that is one day, that army is the very group of people that are going to grab Jesus and they're going to whip him and beat him and nail him to a cross. But even that guy comes to Jesus. We have fishermen that come to him, and what happens is they are being melted in his presence. They are being conformed into something else. What are they being conformed into? They came and they were lost, and now they've been found. They came and they were broken, and now they've been conformed into somebody that is healed. Are you guys getting this today? They came and they were bound, and now they've been conformed into somebody who is free through Christ. There is a change. There's a transfer. There's a melting that happened through humility. And so to you today, and those of you that are online that are listening today, listen to me. Are you willing to embrace a new approach? One, are you willing to say, you know what? I need a change. I need a heart revolution. That's really where it starts. And you say that humility has to be greater than my pride. My pride has to die. Got to revolt against that. Revolution has to happen. But are you also willing to just say, like, God, I got to try a new approach because I'm really messing this thing up. Everyone around me, I realize now that I'm addicted to being right. Yeah, I got that addiction. And what it's doing is it's causing everyone to be hardened around me. Nobody's melting. I'm not making an impact and an influence to where people, when they get around me, they feel compelled to know this Savior and this Redeemer that I'm in a relationship with. Instead, they feel like you're trying to bend and break them. Because if I get my next slide up, what pride does is pride tries to bend and break people, but humility melts them into his image and not ours. This is so big. This is so big. And there's something that you have to understand today. When it comes to this fresh approach, I'm going to just kind of put it plainly for you today. If I can get my next slide, is that the fresh approach is this, is that you have to determine in your heart that people matter most and are worthy of love no matter what. Whether you agree with them, whether you think they're right, whether you think they're wrong, they are still God's children, and they're worthy of his love. They're worthy of our love. Listen to what it says in John 13, 34 through 35. He says, a new command I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. It says, by this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have any love, or if you have love for one another. It's a new approach. It's like, okay, well, I don't like your politics. I don't really care for your lifestyle choices. I raised my kids differently than you're raising your kids. You know, my wife and I, we interact a little differently than you do. We spend our money differently than you do. We invest differently than you do. We like different kinds of foods. Maybe we like a different style of music, maybe a different style of entertainment. But none of that has anything to do with my ability to love you with the love of God, because you're worthy of his love, not because of what you've done or because of what I've done. It's because of what he did. Let me just put some meat on the bones. It was kind of interesting. I was sharing this story. About 2-3 weeks ago, I was golfing with some pastors. You know, some guys were different parts of the nation. One guy I think was from Louisiana. One was from like Rhode Island. And there were a bunch of other guys, and we're at this golf course. And most of them had 4 guys in their group. We only had 3. So this dude like rolls up, man, in this like golf cart, and he's like, I mean, just seemed like a wild dude, man. He had like beer in the back of his cart, man. He was ready to go. And he rolls up and he goes, hey, you guys only got 3 guys? We're like, yeah. Mind you, we're playing in a private group, you know. He goes, well, do you mind if I play with you? And we kind of look at each other, and the guy from Louisiana, you know, in his little southern drawl, yeah, come on, join us. You know, so we're like, yeah, come on, join us. Well, he goes, are you guys ready to play some effing golf then? We're like, yo, like he's ready. This guy's good, like, let's go. And if that offended you that I said that, you've probably said worse. Are you ready to play some? And so we get into it, man. He's F-bombing. He's like just going off, telling some off-color jokes. And about 4 holes in, he goes, hey, so you guys are really nice, man. I mean, we're really encouraging. Hey, good drive, man. That was an amazing putt. Really nice. He goes, man, you guys are really nice. Like, what do you guys do for a living? And one of the guys goes, we're a group of pastors. And all those guys in front of you, those are pastors. And the groups behind us, those are pastors. And you could just see his face change. Like, man, he was like, just, woo, fire came down on this guy. And then he says this blew me away. He goes, well, I don't know how to play golf with pastors. It's like, well, we don't know how to play So and you don't know how to play, so we're just going to keep playing the way we're playing. It was really funny. I thought, what an interesting way of approaching it. I don't know how to play with pastors. Interestingly enough, is the longest round of golf in our entire life. But I believe that God was doing something in that time because he continued to try to, quiet his F-bombs, here and there. He was cracking his beers like real quiet. We were playing at this place that it was in the middle of vineyards. He's like stealing grapes off the thing and kind of slipping them into his bag. It was just really, and we just got a kick out of this guy. But it was maybe around the 15th hole that things kind of took a little bit of a turn. And I remember one of the pastors just said, hey, his name's Zach. Hey, Zach. He's like, what do you do? And he got really quiet. And I could see he really didn't want to answer us. He just got really quiet and he looked to the side and kind of eyes were shifting a little bit. And he says, did you hear about that fire that happened in Paradise, California? And we said, oh, yeah, that one that kind of burned everything down. He goes, well, I lost my home. So I lost my business. He goes, and after that, my wife left me and she turned my kids against me. And he goes, I've lost everything. And he says, but I was pretty wealthy before that. And he said, and he lost everything. He goes, so I got a little bit of savings. And this is kind of where the conversation really, it started to take a dark turn because really what this guy was saying is I'm spending my savings. And then he said something like, and then I'm not really sure where I'm going from there. But it wasn't like, hey, I'm not really sure. Really what he was saying, read between the lines, is I'm considering ending my life. And it's just really an interesting time because in the moment we were compelled, as a pastor, I'm like, man, do we lead this guy in a prayer of salvation? Are we is he gonna kill himself? We're gonna lose him? And I just felt the Lord just said, just keep loving him. Just keep loving him. And that day, I just felt the Lord just say this simple thing. You've put a lot of seed in that guy. You guys put a lot of seed in that guy. And sometimes, even as believers, we fail to realize, we're trying to seal the deal. We're going in hard, man. Hey, you must repent and believe right now, and call upon the name of Jesus. Well, hey, sometimes there's that point. But then there's also times where our approach, we can foul it up because we go in too hard. Sometimes they're looking for a date and we're looking for a marriage. We want to close the deal on them. And I just remember the Lord just saying, you guys got a lot of seed in him. And so I trust someday that the seeds that were planted and somebody else is going to come and water and that there's going to be a harvest and we'll see our friend Zach with his F-bombs and his beers in heaven. Of course, he's going to get it all together before then. But I believe in faith that God's going to arrest his heart. But that's the approach, is that we need a new approach. That we shower people with the love of God. We shower them with the love of God. And listen, you can be right and you can know that you're right and you can still love them. And you can be right and you can know you're right and you don't even need to tell them. You just keep loving them. And you know what will happen is there will be a day where you have an opportunity to tell them the truth. And the truth will melt them and it won't make them hard.